everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have Spring Washam, and she is talking about a book, A Fierce Heart, finding strength, courage, and wisdom in any moment. So, welcome, Spring.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, so I want to hear about all about your background. I find it really interesting. So, you started, you have this Lotus Vine journey that you lead people through journeys, and then you have the East Bay Meditation Center. And I was wondering if you could just start off talking a little bit about your experience in both places.
Well, they're both similar but different. The East Bay Meditation Center is a community that I started almost 14 years ago.
Wow.
And yeah, we are located in downtown Oakland, California, and we offer programs on a donation basis. Meditation, stress reduction, practices in Buddhism, mindfulness, wisdom. So it's amazing in that way. It's a
For
beautiful little,
14 years. Wow. So you've
yeah.
been through all of it because Oakland has gone through a lot of tumult during that time. So,
Yeah.
and I assume, I don't know a little bit, tell me a little bit about the people that come to your meditation center and if that was even a factor when you're in Oakland and in your center.
Well, it was really thought of when we were creating it very thoughtfully. We wanted to be in downtown Oakland because we wanted to be where the people were, urban communities. So we had a lot of focus on disenfranchised communities, low income communities, communities of color, LGBTQ communities, communities that felt pretty much maybe on the outer fringes of
Hmm.
spirituality. When you see people meditating, you often see, very glamorous people, or it feels like
Yeah, it's a
those.
movie star quality to it.
Yes, it's like Hollywood
Right.
or, so we wanted to be where the people were and
Hmm.
offer something. So we were very intentional about where we wanted to be and how we wanted to be focused and how we wanted to offer programs.
Okay, so you're downtown Oakland, and there's a whole bunch of things that happened during that time period, right? Is that
Yeah.
during? Okay. And how did that influence your people's meditation practice and just coming to the center when they came?
Well, down Oakland itself has always been a hot spot for activism, and a lot of activists go there, a lot of people interested in social change.
Hmm.
I remember we were a block away from the Occupy movement that went on for months. Oakland
Wow.
was the second other biggest location outside of New York. And then we lived through like the Trump election and the riots there, and it's like we use that. We use the struggle, we use the suffering, we use the conflict as our practice. It's like right in the middle of it all. Can we sit like a Buddha? Can we open to it? Can we be with the anger, the frustration, the fear, the sadness, the heartbreak that we all experience? So it's like we're right in the storm. And
Yeah.
that's where the edge is for most of us.
Yeah. Do you remember? I don't know. You talk about during the riots with Trump that you were sitting there and meditating, like you just said. And I was wondering what was, and you talk about the anger and the frustration and the fear and just a sense of being distraught, which happened, I'm sure, during all of those different times. Do you remember kind of the thoughts that were running through people's minds at that time?
So, just a couple days after the election, just maybe a day or two, I went to downtown Oakland to lead a group of people meditating. It was an evening program. We offer, 7 p.m. classes. And I just walked into 200 people, and all the emotions were there. And there I am trying to lead a meditation, and the tear gas is coming in. It was so hot in the room. I think emotions, the body heats up. And a volunteer came over to try to close the windows because the tear gas, and we could hear helicopters. And I think there was almost 15,000 people in downtown Oakland having a riot
Wow.
at that time.
Wow.
And there we were, just a couple blocks away. We could hear the police on mega horns. And I just remember thinking, this too is an experience. This too is part of practice.
Hmm.
We don't just use our spiritual practices when everything's blissed out. It was
Right.
like, here we are in the midst of conflict and suffering and emotion, raw emotion. Can I be with my rage? Can I be with my sadness? And mostly could we be with fear because that was the
Mm,
predominant emotion. Was
mm,
this fear of uncertainty,
mm,
unknown.
mm.
So
So I can't even imagine how you centered 200 people when you had tear gas and sirens in the background. I mean, what was the experience like when that happened? I mean, how did you use and open to the experience to make that happen?
I think again in those moments, your wisdom and compassion just kicks on.
Yeah.
You know, at that moment, you just start speaking what's true, you know,
Mm,
and you just start comforting with the words of truth, with how to
mm,
be with this. Let's open to it. Let's just feel what's going on.
mm,
You know, you're there, you're holding it with everybody, but you're kind of steering that ship. And it was
mm,
an experience I won't forget just because of how emotional it was.
mm,
Um, but over the next 4 days, I talked to hundreds of people that came and went. And mostly I was just being with experiences, being with people, being in, you know, people were coming to our center as a refuge, as many people do when things are difficult. They go to their spiritual communities,
mm-hmm.
they gather with like minded people.
Wow,
So,
that's phenomenal. I mean, I'm thinking about. I was just reading a passage in your book when you talk about this is creating a fierce heart is part of what the book, the title of the book, and you said cultivating a fierce heart is about learning to embrace it all, even the most painful aspects of our lives, every experience and all of ourselves. We open up to everything in order to transform it. We become willing to use every condition, challenge, and misery as a teaching, no matter how bad it feels or how dark it gets. Um, so what was the teaching in that moment, or was it to just be still in that moment?
I think it was all of that. It was to be still, it was to feel what's happening, and also to trust deeply in our own capacity to be with whatever the future unfolds for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like the fear was like, what's going to happen, right? What's going to go on? Okay, I have the capacity to meet this moment and what any other moment brings to me. And
Mm-hmm.
this is my spiritual practice. How do I stay centered? How do I stay in my heart, right? In difficult times? How do I not lose myself in that?
Mm-hmm. All right, so this leads us to, I'm kind of imagining your Lotus Vine journey and thinking, wow, okay, how does that fit in? So tell folks what you do I read a little bit on your website, but tell us, folks, what the journey is all about and what happens in those journeys.
Okay, so we'll switch gears here in a way to Lotus Vine. Lotus Vine Journeys came out of my interest in healing trauma
Mm-hmm.
and working with communities with a lot of trauma, and myself hadn't gone through so much as a child and teenager. And it really was born out of I fell apart on this long retreat that I was on, and I realized I had all this unresolved trauma still.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't believe it. I had been blessed by gurus, swam with dolphins. I thought I was over it. Therapy, past life regressions, years of practice. And I was really surprised it was still there. So a friend of mine said, a psychologist friend of mine introduced me in a way. She said, I've been working with this plant, comes from the Amazon region, and it's really helpful in working with PTSD and
Mm-hmm.
trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very skeptical. You know, I was like, oh, this is one of these California new age things. But I ended up going up to the mountains in California and doing what they call a ceremony, working with the plant, ingesting a small amount with a facilitated group leading. The whole thing is very safe, very small. And I trusted my friend who was a clinical psychologist at the
Right.
time. She was present there. And I had one of the most, I guess, important nights of my life. And that led to this really profound curiosity. And I started going to the jungle and doing retreats. Now, this was over 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it was controversial. I'm also in a Buddhist community, and there's a lot of emphasis around non intoxicants and precepts.
Right.
And so I have been on the hot seat around this for a lot of years. But what I discovered when I started going to the jungle, and I was very interested in working with the indigenous people and understanding the roots and the lineage and how
Mm-hmm.
they work with medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So, similar to Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, there's these whole systems of healthcare. And so I began to study that. And then I even moved there for a year to
Wow.
work with a group of
And
female
what country were you living in, just for folks?
Peru.
Peru.
Yeah.
Okay, got
So
it.
all of this was based in Peru in the upper Amazon area,
Hmm.
and working primarily with Shipibo communities and women healers, maestras,
Mm.
and learning from them. So, sort of
Mm.
the wisdom keepers. And then over
Wow.
time, that led me to starting an organization where I merge plant medicine and Buddhism, which are my two.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what Lotus Vine Journey is. Lotus
Okay.
Vine, the lotus flower, and then the vine is the plant, and then the journey to Peru.
And how do you find those two merge together? I mean, how I'm trying to visualize taking plant medicine and then having Buddhism be part of it. How does that integrate together for you when you're?
Well, beautifully, because really what the plant medicine does is it accelerates our awakening.
Mm.
It accelerates our understanding. So it actually, for a lot of people, it accelerates their understanding of core Dharma principles.
Mm.
One very powerful principle being the truth of interconnectedness.
Mm.
We can understand that in the mind, but we don't
Mm.
understand that in the heart and the body. We
Mm.
don't. And then when you're working with the plants, you could feel in your bones and understanding, I
Mm.
am one with this whole universe in a way that changes how you walk on the earth, changes
Mm.
how you perceive yourself. And there's these huge shifts that happen. And
Mm.
so we use the Buddhist framework to understand egolessness, compassion, and there's a huge acceleration that happens for those students and practitioners who are ready. So Lotus
Mm.
Vine kind of works with people already on the spiritual path.
Ah, okay, got it. So do you teach some of the Buddhist principles so that when they're in their experience, they can draw upon that? So you're speaking the same
Yes.
language, I see. And then afterwards, you have a structured format to actually explain some of those journeys, as I understand it from friends of mine that have done those journeys, are they vary very
Yes.
greatly in terms of what someone gets. Um, and it would be nice to have a framework because it's kind of confusing, like how, like what's happening to me, what why is this happening, what's happening. So the framework, it sounds like, is the way that you kind of get everyone on the same page. Am I incorrect in
Yeah. And
understanding that?
Yeah, and it becomes really logical in
Mm.
that way. Like, and we're practicing working with plant medicine. When we start a ceremony, I tell everybody this is meditation. We're sitting up, we're being with the breath. We're whatever arises, we meet. Whatever,
Mm.
it's to be with experience, even though it's rapid, intense purification at moments. It's still the same practice that we do
Mm.
when we're at Spirit Rock Meditation Center and I'm leading a Vipassana course. We are utilizing the same mind, the same principle.
Mm.
Can I
Right,
be in the moment? Can
right,
I feel this? Can I open to this? No matter
right.
how hard it gets. So therefore, having a fierce heart, that title also came out of sitting in many intense moments with plant medicine, with other people, and with communities in that way. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think that the great thing about plant medicine is in some ways it takes, from what I understand, I haven't done it myself, but aside from marijuana, which is legal here in Seattle, but what it does is it accelerates, like you said, something that may be lying under the surface kind of pops up all of a sudden for you to look at. And I know from people who've tried other things like ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever, they talk about how some of these things happen very intensely, and they have to fear some people feel reach their greatest joy. They feel, like you said, a sense of interconnectedness, a sense of equanimity, peace. Other people actually have to face their greatest fears, which is going back to the fierce heart. So when someone faces their greatest fears, how do you actually step them through that process? I mean, what do you think is happening with the plant medicine and their fear, and how do you create that container that you were talking about?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're all learning how to do as spiritual practitioners or just people on the path trying to live a good life, forget just being a spiritual practitioner, just maybe raising your kids and living sanely,
Right,
right? Just living with a sense of sanity right
right,
now
right.
means learning how to become more emotionally intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the key. How do I work with my emotions? How do I work with intense emotions? And that is what most people fear in life and in a ceremony. At our retreats, we work with ayahuasca. That's our plant that we work with.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes these big balls of fear or terror or rage or sorrow arise, and we use it as training.
Mm-hmm.
Am I willing to open to it? Can I feel this? It's the willingness to feel. That's
Mm.
really key. That's
Okay.
key to our liberation. That's key to alchemy. That's key to letting things go. Is we have to be willing to feel them. And so
Mm.
we guide people into that throughout our retreats in Peru and my retreats teaching at residential retreat centers.
Mm.
We're teaching people how to open to deeper layers of emotion
Mm.
and experiences.
Okay, so I want to go into your personal story that you talk about in A Fierce Heart, and you talk about how um, all these things that we're talking about have, whether it's the plant medicine or the Buddhism have helped you. Tell me a little bit about how it helped heal the wounds of racism for you.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that, and I've been writing articles and talking a lot about race and diversity. I mean, if these aren't hot topics right now, I don't know, they're everywhere.
Yes.
And it's about who's included, who's not. And in spiritual communities, these topics are coming up in a big way.
Mm.
Whether they're yoga communities or long-term meditation communities, these issues around diversity and who's included and who's not are on the center stage, we could
Mm-hmm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to learn to deal with them. We can't just go, oh, nothing's happening. We're all one.
Right.
We all are one on the relative absolute level.
Mm-hmm.
On that level, no doubt, we're all stars.
Right.
But there's another truth, and that's the relative level. You could say the karmic level.
Mm-hmm.
And on that relative level, all these things matter. Race, class, culture, all these things matter in a way that they create friction if we're not aware.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I became more aware of all these issues, it just became that I was practicing in communities where I felt excluded.
Really? Oh,
Felt that,
you mean for
well,
yoga? Give me an example of what you mean.
we'll say I started practicing in Buddhist meditation circles over 20 years ago.
Wow, okay.
So I was the youngest person
Mm-hmm.
there, and I was the only person of color.
Okay, wow,
So
okay.
the teachings that are happening on a certain cultural wavelength to a
Interesting.
certain demographic, right? So I'm
Interesting.
from my colorful community in Oakland where I have one set of experiences, and then I'm coming into this community where I love the teachings, but it's being taught on a certain level to a certain group in a certain context,
Interesting.
and that has implications.
And what were your felt implications of that kind of like there's all of a sudden this language and context that was not really resonating with you? How did it like can you give me a couple examples of
Mm.
what was said? Not trying to like bring up hard
Yeah.
memories, but like things that were said that probably were innocently said or approached and that hurt you and how it hurt you.
I think the overall, just everything was framed in this kind of Western way, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the quotes, all the stories were, they were relating to that person's experience, right?
Mm,
Because
mm,
teachers they come from the community and they speak on behalf of the community. So a lot of the experience didn't relate to me. It wasn't that I felt there was harmful racist things being said. No, I didn't feel like that. It was just the complete exclusion of my experience.
so what were the
That was
experiences that
painful.
you would have liked to have heard in those sharings when someone was giving a quote or sharing? What would you have liked to have heard?
Well, I think it really is connecting more to like, so when I started our center in downtown Oakland, I realized right then I needed to translate the Dharma in a whole new frame.
Wow. Okay.
So suddenly it was stories about single mothers in East Oakland. It was quotes by Maya Angelou. It was images of Dr. King on the altar. There was quotes by, great masters and images of them. And we just created a language that,
Yeah.
like, these are your experiences.
Ah,
right? And that
Got it.
adds to a sense of familiarity. I mean, that's why people
Right.
are drawn to affinity groups where it's a women's group, it's speaking to women. If it's a class of, transgender men, they're speaking a certain language.
Mm,
So we're learning how to do that. And so back then I felt like, oh my gosh, this is my life's calling.
mm.
But this community, I feel not included in, not because people are trying to be racist. No,
All right.
it's just that I'm excluded because it's just a different experience.
Right. People were having different life experiences and they don't
Yes.
map to your own life experiences. So there's a sense of like, you kind of don't get me. There's a lack of rapport.
Yes. And it creates doubt when you're committing to that. Like you're
Oh, right. These
training
people
that
don't
way.
understand me. Why would I
Yeah,
want to
because they don't
do this?
understand my community or certainly don't understand what's happening in downtown Oakland. They don't, and there's a sense of they're also being very affluent creates a buffer, right?
Mm,
So people are living more in kind of a heaven realm. They're not
right.
touching, they're not
Right.
touching the urban struggle.
Right. Wow, how
They
fascinating.
can't, speak to that.
Right. So when you went and created your center in Oakland, it's like how can and I know in Buddhism they actually have this idea of you take archetypes and you take gods and goddesses and you worship them and you bring in the energies that they may bring. So when you have Maya Angelou or Martin Luther King, there's this kind of like, these kind of real people that exist that you can kind of bring into your spiritual practice. I totally get that.
Yeah.
I think I get that. Did I get that right?
Yeah, well, in Buddhism, it's not that we're even worshiping anything. The core of Theravada Buddhism or anything, it's not so much, it's that we're trying to uncover the qualities that are there through
Okay.
mindfulness. It's like we're unraveling what's obscuring the beauty, right? And
Okay.
what I love about Buddhism is that it states you're already awakened, you forgot.
Right.
So the whole journey is remembering.
Right. Okay. Got it. So,
Yeah.
so when you bring up scenarios, I'm hearing so part of the experience is that people go through. I mean, what are some of the unique experiences? So it's basically you said it's feeling not included. It's not included in the stories. I assume not included in the role models, like not included.
Yeah.
And so, what are the different ways that you've addressed that in both your practices, right? Because you have this lotus vine, and you also how have you integrated those stories, or what are the stories that are important to touch upon so that people can tune into their sense of exclusion?
Yeah, well, I think it's basically just acknowledging that there's only one story being told on a certain level from
Mm,
one perspective. I think naming that is really important,
mm-hmm.
right? And then just me showing up as who I am. I'm an African American woman. I walk into the room, I sit down to teach. There's going to be a different experience there, right?
Right,
Inherently, I'm going to be sharing something different,
right.
And it's not to make one group wrong or one group right. It's not pitting people against each other. It's just this is part of like, everyone's using the get woke, kind of terminology. It's understanding where stories are coming from, what stories haven't been able to be heard, because the dominant stories are the only narrative. They're the
Uh,
only ones with a microphone. So now there's a push to hear other stories, other
mm,
influences, the women, the indigenous. What are the stories that we haven't heard yet?
right. Yeah,
And
no.
looking for those stories because the community is
Mm,
changing and asking for that.
yeah, and I think what
And yeah.
the reason why I'm asking all these questions is I coached a group that I coached a group of women, 4 or 5 different women. One was Native American, the other was two of the gals were Latino, and the other one was from India,
Mm,
heritage, and um, this very well-intentioned, great group, nonprofit, came in and they offered a bunch of resources so that people can be more understanding and understand the long history of racism and white supremacy within the culture. And what was interesting is it kind of set off a dynamic where it polarized everyone, literally to the point that
mm,
there was one group, there was like a white group and a people of color group that they didn't mix within that because the people of color group didn't feel safe to talk
Yeah.
about their experiences, and the white people felt scared to talk
Yeah.
about their own reaction to those materials. And so I think the intent of any of these processes is to, as you said earlier, become one. Yet in this particular case, the education itself was polarizing, and it set up this dynamic where one person felt there's a group. I would say the white people felt guilt and shame and
Mhm.
defensiveness, and then the people of color felt unheard and then traumatized because anytime people would try to understand, their ignorance and lack of understanding was so like hit someone on a raw
Mhm.
basis because they re-experienced trauma from their earlier days. And I'm kind of curious how, given your background, what you think would be a better way, because I'm sure that there were some aspects of the program that were great and there's some dialogue that was great. But even like I would talk to the young women of color and and one of them, like they were asked to do things that were just like strange. Like, I would
Mhm.
like you to be my of color teacher, like spirit animal. So she described me
Yeah.
as like, I'm not your person
Yeah.
of color spirit animal. Am I supposed to like be coaching to be woke? Like, what is it?
Yeah.
So all this stuff. So I'm sure you've seen or seen some of these things before. So given your experience, what would you think are some of the root problems in this dialogue that's happening, and what do you think are some of the solutions?
Well, first to say, I know this dynamic so well. On every side, I have been in more diversity trainings, more meetings, more controversy with trainers coming in. First is to understand, too, that doing a diversity training is a very new phenomenon.
Hmm.
This is just being invented.
Right.
Like we speak, I have friends that are just like coming up with exercises like, well, let's see how this, so we're kindergartners,
Right.
right? There's very few skilled ones. And I've seen so many trainings go into fighting polarizations and groups against each other. I have seen that even at big spiritual organizations. Okay, so it's not uncommon if everything isn't kind of laid out and there isn't the right kind of support system. Um, and so I think for everyone right now, it's just such a charged issue. So a
Hmm.
lot of communities go, "Oh my God, this is so painful. I don't know how to address it. So let's pretend it's not happening." That
Mm.
doesn't work. Or they bring in a training and it seems like initially everything gets worse.
Right.
But if we can bring it all up and there can be one person who can be skillful and navigate, and this one person, wow, they have to be kind of woke themselves and to
Right.
speak to every side, which is hard, right? Because they themselves may get triggered, or
Right.
they might be white, or they
Right.
might be a person of color, and those
Right.
are going to be, counter triggers right there. But it's really to kind of bring the group together with a kind of deep love and compassion and allow the groups to separately do their own work for a period of time.
Mm. Oh,
I think in
interesting.
the early stages, it can be helpful while people are understanding the issues and working through those big triggers that they don't try to work them out side by side.
Okay. So, like, so for example, I'll tell you. So for this group, um, eh, 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 I can't name names, but it's like, we have this workshop and I still have, white males who run this whole organization speak to me as if I was their like secretary,
Right.
or and these are also women. So who knows what part of it is gender and what part of it is race, or I have no idea, or I have no idea. Okay, but it's like, how do we? So they are just they took the white men took the training, and they wanted the white man to like all of a sudden adjust and adapt their behavior almost immediately, which
Right.
didn't happen, and which is so hurtful. It's like, you understand what my issues are, but now you're not adapting. And like, I feel like, what is it going to take for you to understand what's happening? So what would you say to, because I'm sure this happens in
Oh, I've
meditation.
Yeah, these are same things in spiritual communities. Who has the power? Who gets to speak? Who gets to talk to and so one of the problems with some of these diversity trainings is the approach is very much just the mind.
Mm.
It has to be connected to someone's heart. We are asking people to transform something.
Right,
We
you're
are
asking to
asking
to
for a
to change
deeper
your behavior and change deeply inside something that they have been habituated
condition.
to.
Yeah, and not only conditioned in society, but conditioned from their own family for years. This is the way it is. So the only way that those types of transformations honestly really take effect is through the heart. If you
Hmm.
kind of beat someone up on the head, like, you need to wake up, you're not, it's not going to happen. The resistance is really powerful. I mean, the backlash can be even more of, we're seeing that on a societal level.
Right.
And so it has to come through the heart. This is a journey of love and compassion. And in spiritual communities, I always encourage people, you want to see your biases. This is what you want. This is why we're here, to
Hmm.
see the biases, to see where we are favoring one group over another. We
Mm.
want to see racism. We want to see this. So let's not shy away from it. Let's open to this as part of our ending delusion.
Right. Yeah,
And so
so it's
that's an
almost like, yeah, it's
emphasis
almost
more.
like I see like two separate groups, like, people of color and white, so it feels weird to separate, but I can see that the issues are different. Like one is feeling guilty and shameful and like defensive and not wanting to hear at some level because they don't want to see some aspect that they don't feel they relate to on an identity level, but yet is still true regardless of whether they are like that. And then there's the people of color who are literally traumatized. I mean, I had so many people
I
who were
understand.
like not heard, not understood, treated less than, and it's a female thing layered on with an there's a female issue in which there's
Yes.
like this less than scenario, and then there's another layer of race that goes on with all the different female issues, right? Different depending on your race, there's a different kind of energy that kind of gets presented to you that is also traumatizing. So
I know. It's just a lot to hold. Hence, you
yeah.
gotta have a spiritual practice. Otherwise, these things. And I will say that, at East Bay Meditation Center, when we first opened, we had a course within the first 6 months of opening called White Awake.
Huh.
And that was for white communities. And there's so much work around white communities getting together to educate themselves on all these issues. And that's
Okay.
why I said initially it's good to kind of, as these traumas kind of get lodged out into the, open space, like it's good to talk for white communities to gather and talk about experiences and try to learn together. Like,
Mm.
what is happening? What is my conditioning? Because in some ways they're innocent in that.
Right, they are. It's just like
There's like,
anything.
it's
Yeah.
just like you're not aware. You're genuinely, unconscious is just that. You are not conscious of it.
Right.
So how do you become conscious in a really loving way, in a safe way?
Yeah, and so
They
I
need
can
to wake
see
up to that together.
I had this most beautiful meditation that I did in a workshop just recently, that I experienced rather. And in the meditation, um, you say to the person, like, it's like you're looking at the other person. So I would look at you and I would say, I see myself in you. You experience the same problems that I experienced. You have the same heart that, you go through and you look at the connection between the two, that you look at the unifying aspects versus, and that we're all having a human experience. They're all experiencing the same kinds of things. And I'm not sure what was happening with the gal that I was working with, but she was clearly had a lot on her mind and on her heart. And I just looked at her and I just kept on saying this over and over again. And she was just crying and releasing and crying and releasing. And it was just so beautiful. We didn't say one word. I mean, aside from saying this quiet meditation over and over again, it's the thing that you were saying earlier, to just have someone who's present and holding. They don't even know I don't know her story. I'm not sure
Right.
exactly why she's crying. I'm not sure. She was really like sobbing, and And there is something about just looking at someone in the eyes and saying,
Yeah,
like, you're just
I've
like
done
me.
that.
And I
Hmm.
thought that would be just such a beautiful thing to do in one of these trainings versus kind of like, because it's more focusing on the differences than focusing on how we're similar
Yes,
and
that,
love.
yeah, and that's why I say it has to be done through the heart.
Yeah,
You have to feel your connection with another being to want to understand how you relate to them. You have to
yeah.
feel interested. You have to see yourself in them,
Hmm.
right? And so it's not, so there's a lot of trainings that are happening that are mandated right now that I think is
Hmm.
an important start, but they also come with resistance and backlash.
Yeah,
Our
they're
culture right
awful. They
now, the
torment
backlash.
people. They're like
Yeah.
checklists. Like I'm like, I
Well,
checked this and you
yeah.
checked this, and now I want you to sign in this checkbox that says that you've watched this, so that if someone tries to sue the company, they can really just say you're irresponsible. It's like, what kind of training is this? I
Well,
mean,
it's
it's crazy.
basic. It's not evolved fully yet because we're
Yeah,
evolving it as we grow. We're growing into this kind of shared realization,
yeah,
right? And so right now, I just feel like with all the trainings, I just laugh a lot because I'm like, wow, we're really in preschool,
we
we're
are.
just fumbling around and it's painful
And people
and
get
part of
hurt.
it. I
People get
know.
hurt. Okay, so
I do know. Yeah.
I want to talk about. So let's talk back about the fierce heart and how. And I was wondering if you could, in the next, 5 to 9 minutes, step us through an experience so that we understand like how Buddhism would be used to cultivate a fierce heart. Maybe you can take right, like today, a lot of people are distraught because the Trump impeachment hearings are now out in the public, and my
Mhm.
husband's like, I can't even watch the news. Like, I know I'm gonna get distressed, so I don't even watch the news because it's going to be tilted in some direction, and it's just gonna get me mad. And I
Right.
thought, okay, I get that, and I think you have to, exercise self love. But then also, don't you want to know because it's affecting our country? So,
Mhm.
could you step us through an exercise during a time that we're having such a hard time now trying to
Yeah.
cope?
So I think one of the things that we can definitely do, and is to understand that the rather you can be any background, Christian or Muslim or Hindu
Right.
or a scientist, whatever you relate. It's really the foundation of Buddhism is really the word mindfulness, the practice of being mindful.
Hmm.
That's what we're talking about. It's really universal. It doesn't really belong to any tradition. It can fit anywhere. We
Hmm.
all could agree right away that being more present in our body and awake is going to help the world. It's going to help us. It's going to help, when we're just being distracted or we're eating or we're checking out or drinking, so the whole practice is like, can I be here in this moment? Can I open to this? And so when we're teaching meditation, we're basically having people focus on their breath because that's a way that they can come into their body. The idea is that the suffering is that we're lost a lot in the stories of the mind, right? We're in these dramas every second, one story after another. There's no break in them, right? It's like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, the impeachment hearing. Oh my God, the president. Oh my God, I've got to pay my bills.
Right.
Where's this person? It's like there's no space,
Right.
right? The mind is just like, and most of the thoughts are really painful. They're scary. They're terrible. The world's ending. What about the polar bears? Oh my gosh, I'm late.
Right.
So we don't have any peace of mind.
Right.
So what we're asking, or the practice of mindfulness is right when one big story ends, right before another one picks up, there's a
Hmm.
moment called now,
Hmm.
here. It may be just a split second, but it's like the mind, it's like between, it's like you turn the TV off for a minute and
Right.
you just sit, right? And it's like, oh, okay, before you turn it back on again, like there's this moment called here and now. And what we want to learn is to live more in that place, that
Mm.
there's another reality in the here and now.
Right.
And it's not feeding the stories. It's just sitting. And so what we do is we practice following the breath and being in the body as a way to break the fixation with the constant obsession on stories in the mind.
Ah, I see.
The
Okay.
habit.
Okay, got
We're
it.
just
So,
lost in it. It's our habit.
right. So,
So we can take a moment or two
yeah.
now,
Yeah,
if
let's
you
go ahead and
like.
do that. That'd be great if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, yeah. So to all the
Could we do
listeners,
a 6 minute one? Is that possible?
If you're comfortable with 6 minutes, I'm comfortable with 6 minutes. I
Okay.
don't have a bell here. I always like to ring a little bell, or I'll talk us out of it. But it's
Okay.
a beautiful way, so we can invite all the listeners to just wherever you are, try to pull over or pause, or in your house, and you just want to find a quiet moment, a quiet place, or even shut your office door or wherever you are. And you just really begin by just closing the eyes and relaxing. Often I tell people to relax their shoulders and their neck, because often our bodies are clenched
Hmm.
all day. We're not even aware that we're clenching. So just to kind of soften the neck and the shoulders and soften your hands. Notice where your hands are. And then as you bring your awareness more into your body, come into the belly. Maybe right under the belly button, take some deep belly breaths. Often we're holding energy in the belly. That's where we digest life. So taking some breaths, letting the belly, a soft belly, and as you breathe out, just inviting your body to become more relaxed. And we're going to use the breath as our object for developing mindfulness. So the mind will have a resting place, an object to feel. So just as you breathe in the belly, just begin to notice the in breath as the breath rises, and then the out breath. And you're not controlling the breath in any way. You're just letting the breath be natural. You're just resting your mind with the feelings, the sensations. And you might feel the breath a little bit more in your chest or even maybe your nose. So just really become aware of where you notice the rhythm of the flow of the breath moving in and then out. And just settling your awareness there, following the breath. If thoughts arise, they just become more background, letting them go. We just turning the TV off for just a couple moments, the TV of the mind. Just feeling the breath in the body. Taking your time, just here, just now. Following the breath. As the breath rises, notice the breath on the inhalation. And then notice the breath on the exhalation. And it can help as we move to closing out this short meditation, and just also to breathe the word peace on the in breath. as if you're just breathing in peace and breathing out peace on the out breath. And notice the body respond to that. You can feel the body softening, letting go, relaxing. And then we'll close out this meditation just by bringing our hands together in a prayer position, and we just bow. We like to bow, just bowing to the practice, to the present moment.
Wonderful. That was so nice. I can just imagine that only took 5 minutes, right? It doesn't take
Yeah,
a long time. It doesn't require any equipment. You don't have to go to a yoga class. Just breathing in and out and watching your breath. It's the simplest thing that you could
it
do.
is very simple. You don't have to join anything. You don't have to convert to anything. You don't have to buy beads
Right.
or, start acting different.
Yeah, exactly. Just breathe. I
Just
love it. We've been talking to Spring Washam, and she's been sharing with us some of the ideas in her book, A Fierce Heart, Finding Strength, Courage, and Wisdom in Any Moment. Thank you so much.
yes, thank you.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.